but I would like to clarify something. We're not trying to scare kids. This president's foreign policy is what's scaring the kids of this country. And that people have said today, why are people believing this? Why are people believing this big internet hoax? Well, it's the same people that told us Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. Same people that told us Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Same people that told us we were going to be able to use the oil for reconstruction money. Same people that told us that we'd be greeted as liberators, not occupiers. Same people, same president that told us the Taliban is gone. Same president that told us that Poland is our ally 2 days before they pull out. Same president that tells us Iraq is going just great. Same president that tells us the economy is going just great. Same people that told us the tax cut was going to create millions of jobs. Same people that told us that the Medicare program only cost $400 billion when it really cost $540 billion. So please forgive us for not believing what you're saying. Please forgive the students of this country for not believing what you're saying. Not one thing about this war that has been told to the American people or that has been told to these college students has been true. Not one thing. Bremer says we need more troops. The Pentagon says we need more troops.
Oh, my word. Oh, my word.
Those who read newspapers and watch television and listen to the radio are given no real sense of the scale of the bloodshed among ordinary Iraqis. If you ask somebody who is quite in the street, who's opposed to the war and doesn't like the idea, but you ask them, how many Iraqis do you think have been killed as a result of Blair's and Bush's invasion? They may say a few thousand, they may not know. In fact, the most reliable survey, which was done by the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health with Iraqis, an extraordinary survey, meticulous and conscientious and quite courageous in the way it was carried out, peer-reviewed, probably leads us to almost 1 million people. Les Roberts, who led that study, he said it seems as if the scale of killing in Iraq will have passed the scale of killing in Rwanda. Statistically, the majority of terrorism is our terrorism. It is state terrorism. There's no question about that. And the greatest victims of terrorism are Muslims. Those who either died as a result of the medieval embargo imposed on Iraq during the 1990s, or Palestinians who've died, and others. So the whole understanding of terrorism is upside down. Now there is, as opposed to state terrorism, a kind of privatized terrorism. It's very tiny. It's run by organizations called Al-Qaeda. There was one study at the University of Chicago that found that of this privatized terrorism, in the last 30-odd years, something like 20-odd thousand people had died. A very tiny figure compared to the millions who have died as a result of state terrorism. I don't think there is a war on terror. I think that's a propaganda notion. The attacks of September the 11th were appropriated by a clique in the US establishment in order to further its aims around the world. If that isn't clear to most people, as I believe it is, then I don't know where they've been for the last few years. But it's not reported that way. Yes, a lot of journalists put terrorism and war on terror in inverted commas, but after a while they weary of that. It's as if there really is a war on terror. And there isn't a war on terror. There is a war of terror.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise? Without objection.
Most Americans would agree that it would be prudent to have a plan to provide for the continuity of government and the rule of law in case of a devastating terrorist attack or natural disaster. A plan that would provide for the cooperation, the coordination, and continued functioning of all three branches of the government. The Bush administration tells us they have such a plan. They introduced a little sketchy public version that's clearly inadequate and doesn't really tell us what they have in mind. But they said, don't worry, there's a detailed classified version. But now they've denied the entire Homeland Security Committee of the United States House of Representatives access to their so-called detailed plan to provide for continuity of government. They say, trust us. Trust us, the people who brought us Katrina, to be competent in face of a disaster. Trust us, the people who brought us warrantless wiretapping and other excesses eroding our civil liberties. Trust us. Maybe the plan just really doesn't exist, and that's why they won't show it to us. I don't know. Or maybe there's something there that's outrageous. The American people need their elected representatives to review this plan for the continuity of government.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
The House just passed President Bush's bill to redefine the treatment of detainees, and the Senate's expected to do the same thing tomorrow. Buried deep inside this legislation is a provision that will pardon President Bush and all the members of his administration of any possible crimes connected with the torture and mistreatment of detainees, dated all the way back to September 11, 2001. At least President Nixon had Gerald Ford to do his dirty work. President Bush is trying to pardon himself. Here's the deal. Under the War Crimes Act, violations of the Geneva Conventions are felonies, in some cases punishable by death. When the Supreme Court ruled the Geneva Conventions applied to al-Qaeda and Taliban detainees, President Bush and his boys were suddenly in big trouble. They've been working these prisoners over pretty good. In an effort to avoid possible prosecution, they're trying to cram this bill through Congress before the end of the week when Congress adjourns. The reason there's such a rush to do this, if the Democrats get control of the House in November, well, this kind of legislation probably wouldn't pass. You want to know the real disgrace of what these people are about to do or in the process of doing? Senator Bill Frist and Congressman Dennis Hastert and their Republican stooges apparently don't see anything wrong with this. I really do wonder sometimes what we're becoming in this country. The question is this: should Congress pass a bill giving retroactive immunity to President Bush for possible war crimes? Email your thoughts to CaffertyFile@CNN.com or go to CNN.com/CaffertyFile.
The Bush administration's open borders policy and its decision to ignore the enforcement of this country's immigration laws is part of a broader agenda. President Bush signed a formal agreement that will end the United States as we know it, and he took the step without approval from either the U.S. Congress or the people of the United States. Bill Tucker reports.
The Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America sounds benign, hardly like a policy that critics call NAFTA on steroids. It's a deal that few have even heard of.
It's being done again by very few people at the very top on behalf of the investment class, but the working class of people, political officials across our country, from communities, from cities and so forth, they don't know anything about this.
Yet it was agreed to by Mexico's President Fox, Canada's Prime Minister Martin, and President Bush in 2005. Administration officials counter their critics by saying everything about SPP is on the White House website. And they say the partnership is not a treaty, but more of an outline of priorities between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. Still, some wonder why there haven't been public discussions about the goals being pursued.
This SPP includes, for instance, a committee that is sitting down to harmonize our meat inspection and food safety. So how far away from a trade agreement can your dining room table and what you feed your kids be?
Other parts of the agreement mention border security as an issue, which include all of North America. In fact, the name of the agreement is not Security and Prosperity of the United States, but of North America.
When we are elected officials, we expect them to act on our behalf. When we get involved in cooperative frameworks with other countries for joint regulation of fisheries or rail transportation or the skies, we're basically sharing our sovereignty with that government and outsourcing some of what we give our elected officials.
As disturbing as some find SPP, there is legislation in the House introduced by Florida's Katherine Harris that closely resembles the goals of the partnership. Included in that bill is a section which calls for the securing of Mexico's southern border by the United States and Canada. Lou, that's not the border with the United States, that's the border they share with Belize and Guatemala.
The idea that the White House would respond that this is on their website This involves intricate workings amongst the Commerce Department of this country and Canada and Mexico's, of course, a regional prosperity and security program. This is absolute ignorance. And the fact that we reported this, we should point out, when it was signed. But as we watch this thing progress, these working groups are continuing, they're intensifying. What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I hope, I pray that I'm right when I said yes. But this is beyond belief. Bill Tucker, thank you very much. It brings us to the subject of our poll tonight. Do you think maybe somebody should take a vote if we're going to merge the United States with Canada and Mexico? Maybe, you know, people like you and me vote. Yes or no? Please cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll have the results here later in the broadcast.
Let me give you a little commentary on the Holocaust. The Holocaust is generally deemed to be the worst travesty in human history. 5 or 6 million Jews. I don't know what the actual count was, but it was a lot of people. They did a genocide. They tried to wipe out an entire race. Hitler did not take Germany by force. He did not drive in with army tanks. Hitler was elected. Anybody have any idea what the vote count was? What his percentage of the total was? 98% in Austria-Hungary. That's just about everybody. Everybody voted for Hitler because he was going to solve all their economic problems. Did Hitler get elected on Monday and start throwing people into ovens on Friday? No. It was a gradual process. The first thing that Hitler did was start to write newspaper articles. Everything that was going wrong was the Jews' fault. They're the ones that caused all these problems. Did the Jews write their own newspaper articles and go, I disagree? Well, not that I can think of. I've never read any newspaper articles that, contradicted any of that. So then the Jews had to wear the Star of David so that we can tell who you are. Did they say, no, that's a violation of my privacy. I don't have to tell you whether, I'm Jewish or not. No, the Jews decided, well, it's a religious symbol. We love God. We should be proud to wear the Star of David. Eventually, the Germans came in and they broke all of the windows in all of the Jewish businesses in one weekend. Saturday night was known as Kristallnacht, which is German for Night of Glass. You couldn't walk up and down the sidewalks because they were filled with glass. Did the Jews rise up and say, now, damn it, you're violating my property. You shouldn't do that? No. Gosh, we don't want to make the Germans any madder than they already are. We want to just kind of go along to get along. Don't piss them off. They've got guns. Eventually, the Germans are loading them up into cattle trailers on the train. Where do you think you're going? On vacation? Where do you think they're going to take you? Well, now you're cold and naked and they're walking you into the ovens where you're going to go to mass execution. Is it time now to raise your hand and say, I tend to disagree with all of this? Bang! You're dead. It's too late to complain. You should have complained at the beginning when you at least had a chance. My question to you, and I don't expect you to answer it, just think about it in your head. How bad do things have to get before you do something? Do they have to take away all your property? Do they have to license every activity that you want to engage in? Do they have to be throwing you on cattle cars before you start to say, now wait a minute, I don't think this is a good idea? How long is it going to be before you finally resist and say, no, I will not comply? Period. That's a different answer for each person. Ask yourself now, because sooner or later you're going to come to that line, and when they cross it, what are you going to say? Well, okay, cross this line. Okay, now cross that line. Okay, now cross this line. And pretty soon you're in a corner. Sooner or later you've got to draw a line and stand your ground, whether anybody else does or not. That is what liberty is all about. If you think I am radical, let me share with you some thoughts from some of the founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson said, and this country with its institutions belong to the people who... Thomas Jefferson. And what country can preserve its liberties if its rulers are not warned from time to time that this people preserve the spirit of resistance? Let them take arms. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Right? We're talking bloodshed if necessary. Abraham Lincoln. This country, with its institutions, belongs to the people who inhabit it. Whenever they shall grow weary of their existing government, they can exercise their constitutional right of amending it, or their constitutional right to dismember or overthrow it. He also said, we the people are the rightful masters of Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who pervert the Constitution. How do you know if the Constitution's been perverted if you haven't read it?
You know, you get all freaked out and you start waving the, I have my rights. I'm an American. I don't care what you are. And I'm a New World Order soldier. Okay? And you are under martial law. You have no rights. The Constitution, what the hell is that? Is that toilet paper? You know, I did take a crap this morning, and I wiped my ass. The paper was kind of brown. It did have some writing on it. Freedom of what? Freedom of speech. Oh, no, that went down the toilet with my crap. I mean, you were on the internet years back, right? Didn't you see the signs? All right? Why do you think the United States borders were so fluid, both the Canadian and the Mexican border? Because your government, the big free government, freedom fighters, was assembling a new world order army. And how were they going to do that? Were they going to recruit people like you? Or maybe your brother over there, or your son? No. They were going to recruit outsiders. People that give a crap about their family. People that give a crap about this country because they're not an American. I mean, I'm not saying that all those people did that. Of course not. Only a very select few. But how are you going to get that select few to do anything unless it's porous? I mean, come on, dude. I know you're not stupid, all right? I know that you're not dumb. Don't you remember reading all those blogs and seeing all those blogs and seeing all the comments and on the message boards back in early 2007 about how there would not be a 2008 election? It would be postponed because of a, let's say, a national emergency. Don't you remember seeing that? And for the most part, the president would become king of the United States. Don't you remember seeing that? Dude, wake up. But it's too late now. See, the beauty of it all is that I can shoot you dead in the street. If you decide to walk across the street to get a drink of water out of that mud puddle, I'm a soldier. I can take your life without any responsibility, without any repercussions at all. Why? Because I'm a new world order soldier. You're just a pawn. You're nobody. You're trash as far as I'm concerned. And why am I telling you this? It's kind of like a movie. You know? The bad guy tells the good guy how it all occurred. Because somehow, some way, I get some kind of gratification by telling you this. Because you're so stupid that you didn't see the signs and you didn't take action. All right? Don't you know that the President of the United States signed a bill in May of 2007 that stated if there was a national emergency, okay, then basically he could maintain his presidency indefinitely. He could. And nobody could touch him. Nobody. Look it up. Look it up. It's some clause that's right in there with that Patriot Act. Patriot Act. What a scam that was, huh? That's the biggest scam going, isn't it? See, that was the beginning of the end right there. But you're so stupid that you didn't see it. And now look at you. You and your family are starving to death. You're walking across the street to get a little bit of water out of a mud puddle. You're not driving around your BMWs. You're not driving around, okay, going up to the mountains and going to Vegas and going to the Bahamas and Hawaii and, you know, getting laid and doing drugs and drinking on. That's just gone, buddy. You are a slave to the New World Order. How's it feel? How does it feel? Tell me, how does it feel? Whisper to me. How does it feel being a slave? And you know what? You know what the funniest thing about the whole 9 yards is? Everybody thinks, oh, it's a Secret Service. And, oh, no, it's a CIA. Oh, no, it's the FBI that did all that. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's the banking system. The banking system, baby. That's who rules the world. The man with the most money wins. You know that. I got to get back to marching. I got a lot of neighborhoods to scout out and take some people down. The people that are not going to submit. But if you happen to live until you go to bed, think to yourself, why am I not free? Why? Because you didn't do a goddamn thing about it when you had the chance.
This is Fantasyland. We're talking about ending the war. My God, we're just starting a war right today. There was a vote in the Senate today. Joe Lieberman, who authored the Iraq resolution, has authored another resolution, and it is essentially a fig leaf to let George Bush go to war with Iran. And I want to congratulate Biden for voting against it, Dodd for voting against it, and I'm ashamed of you, Hillary, for voting for it. You're not going to get another shot at this, because what's happened, if this war ensues, we invade, and they're looking for an excuse to do it. And Obama was not even there to vote.
Senator Clinton, I want to give you a chance to respond.
It's a record vote. Clerk, please read the bill.
This is State Representative Debbie Riddle. She authored the bill that would require voters to show a photo ID.
Clerk, ring the bell. It's a record vote.
It's all about integrity.
Record vote.
But the integrity of one person, one vote doesn't apply at the legislature. We found many lawmakers vote more than once. Take a look. Riddle votes, turns around, votes again for State Rep Kemple. Rewind. And watch the men on the screen. Elkins goes to vote for Merritt, but Hancock is faster. Elkins heads back to his desk, but before he can vote, Joe Crabb turns around and beats him to it. There is so much going on during the vote on the HPV vaccine mandate, you really have to pay attention. Start with State Rep Hamilton at his desk, who leans over to vote a second time for his desk mate Dan Branch, then reaches back to vote for Charlie Howard and casts a fourth vote for Wayne Smith. He's not the only one scrambling to vote. Rewind the video and take a look at the top of the screen. State Reps West and Phillips both lean over to vote for themselves and their desk mates. Phillips votes a third time for Christian. On the left, Donna Howard votes for State Rep Vo. State Representative Dunham didn't have to leave his chair to cast 4 votes. One for himself, then for Coleman, Martinez Fisher, and then Veazey. Sometimes the voting is across party lines. Hartnett, a Republican, reaches back to vote for Democrat Oliveira. Democrat Matt Reynolds votes for Republican England, and Republican John Davis votes for Democrat Noriega. Most voters have no way of knowing if their lawmakers are actually casting their own vote. Even though the legislature is broadcast on cable TV, the cameras change from this to this when it's time to vote. But if you're sitting on the third floor gallery,
I certainly noticed that there appear to be far more votes on the tick board than there were people in the room.
Arnie and Laurel Weiss were baffled when they came to see the legislature in action.
It seems very inappropriate, and they should do something about it. Yeah, definitely.
State Rep Debbie Reynolds says voting for other members is done out of necessity.
We have a lot of votes. We have a lot of amendments. And there's times when we don't break for lunch and we don't break for dinner. We don't have bathroom breaks.
Necessity or not, one thing is clear. They aren't supposed to be doing it. According to the official House rules, written, voted, and approved by lawmakers at the beginning of the session, any member found guilty by the House of knowingly voting for another member on the voting machine shall be subject to discipline deemed appropriate by the House.
Clerk, ring the bell. It's a record.
So, should lawmakers do it?
Well, there's no question.
At face value, it seems a blatant affront to their own rules.
It is against their own rules, but the issue is with enforcement. Now, it's the Speaker's job to make sure the rules are followed. He declined to talk to us on camera, but his spokesperson sent us a statement that basically says they leave it up to the House members. Although the practice is widespread, we couldn't find any instances of lawmakers being disciplined for voting more than once.
I don't know what most of you are so upset about. I mean, if you're going to have to lose freedom, well, what better country to do it to than the great old U.S. of A.? I mean, hell, y'all bitch and complain, you know. You don't even take into consideration the fact that we got Walmart. Well, how great is that? I mean, any hour of the day, you can go in and buy whatever you want. You can just consume. You just consume it up.
Agents were out of ammunition.
They could have killed nearly every ATF agent out there the day of the raid had they kept shooting. But when they said they would leave their property, they quit shooting.
You got to argue with me, you come and argue with me. You come point guns in the direction of my wives and my kids, damn it, I'll meet you at the door any time. And I'm sorry some of you guys got shot. But, hey, God will have to sort that out, won't he? It's kind of like getting into a fight with a couple of next-door neighbors where the little brother comes over and whips you, and then the big brother comes over to investigate. You know? Anyway, we'll try to work this out.
Official story. Okay? They're a conspiracy theorist. And well, that's what conspiracy theorists do. They think for themselves. I mean, they question their government. I mean, well, I hope they pass that thought crime law, because I mean, these people got to be dealt with. But anyway, you know, and then the people that agreed with the official version of what happened, they were labeled experts. You know, that's why that box is so good. I mean, you don't even got to think for yourself, people. They do it all for you. You're so ungrateful. Just ungrateful.
This is a joke, okay? Because this is about 84% of Americans' top national security experts saying we're losing the war in Iraq. This is about all these generals that we've been showing night in and night out saying there's no plan to get out of here. There was a bad plan to end. There was a bad plan to start with. There was no plan. Bad information, bad intelligence, nothing was right. Look back at everything they said about using the oil for reconstruction money, about being greeted as liberators, about all this nonsense that we heard before. This is an opportunity for this administration, Mr. Meek, to try to change the subject. And all of a sudden we're talking about a few political prisoners, and it has enormous ramifications. But the bottom line is this. This administration wants to talk about anything but the war or the economy. They want to change the subject anytime they get a chance to. And now we've got this debate about military prisoners. And I'm not saying it's not important, but my God, you got millions of people living in poverty. You got seniors, you're threatening them with their Medicare. You got 40-some million people with no health insurance. You got stagnant wages. You have gas prices going up. You have health care going up. You have tuition going up. You have poverty rates going up. You got veterans benefits going down. And you want to talk about this one little sliver to change the subject. And you're coming up with all these new phrases again, Islamofascism and all this other stuff. Yield to my friend.
What a gentleman yield. You yield, sir.
Yeah, I yield
because Mr. Ryan.
Well, you know what, though? Let me finish, Mr. Meek.
I yield
the bottom
back,
line
Mr.
is
Ryan.
this. The bottom line is this.
What's the bottom line?
Here's the cost. $8.4 billion per month. $1.9 billion per week in Iraq. $275 million per day in Iraq. $11.5 million per hour in Iraq. If this is the legacy of the Bush administration, and you know what? If I was in the White House, I wouldn't want to talk about this either. I would talk about anything possible other than this fact. Because when you start adding these numbers up, you want to start talking about providing health care for millions of citizens. You want to talk about lower tuition costs. You want to talk about investing in alternative energy sources to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. You want to talk about what Mr. Micah wants to do with airline security and port security. We got the money.
Yeah.
We got the money.
We got it.
But we're spending it in a black hole called Iraq.
You know, we gotta get them Al-Qaedas before they get us. They're gonna try to get us over here if we don't get them over there. And wow, you want to fight? You want to fight the Al-Qaedas here, or you want to fight the Al-Qaedas over there? I mean, it's up to you, people. You know, stop worrying about freedom. It's unimportant at this juncture.
I know it's a tough economic choice to make these days. I know the jobs suck. I know school is too expensive for a lot of people. You know, I know they make it attractive, but you just you have to continue to remember what it is that they're doing. And that organization does not exist to give you money for school. That organization exists to assert the political will of the United States government against other people by force of arms. And what they do is not like it's portrayed in the movies. They're not sending you out there to be a hero. They're sending you out there to be a bully. You know, they're not sending you out there to be a hero. That's not what it's really about. It's never been about that. It's never been about that. You know, the fact that some people fight back and put you in danger is also part of the equation. But, you know, it's not, the Iraqis never presented any threat to this country. And if we leave, those Iraqis don't present any threat to this country after we leave. Why put yourself in a position to go over there and be forced by a circumstance not of your choosing to take the life of another human being who's a total stranger? Because they're not, you know, they're not some evil caricature like you've seen in the films and all that stuff. They're people. They have mothers, they have fathers, they have sisters, they have brothers, they have children. You know, there's people that love them just like there's people that love you. You know, and those people grieve when they lose them, just like people grieve if they lose you. You know, that's maybe not as dramatic and as exciting, you know, and clear cut, you know, and easy to understand as you know, the sort of simple binary world of good and evil that you get painted for you, but that's not the way the real world is. You know, and in the real world, again, you have to live with the consequences of your decisions the rest of your life. Think hard. Yeah, I served in 8 conflict areas, and you know, I raised my right hand 8 times, or no, I raised my hand 5 times during the course of one career, and took an oath, and that oath was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. You know, I went to 8 conflict areas. I never met a single person who was an enemy of the United States Constitution. Not one. There are no enemies of the Constitution. I did spend a lot of time going out there again and becoming a political instrument, you know, for transnational corporations and to preserve American, you know, military and political supremacy around the world. But that's not in the oath. That's not in the oath. There were nobody threatening the Constitution in Vietnam. There was nobody threatening the Constitution in Grenada, Guatemala, El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, Somalia, Haiti. I went to all those places. I never met anybody that was a threat to the Constitution or the principles of the Constitution, for that matter. You know, I just met people. I just met people, and they put me in circumstances where I had to do a lot of things that I wish I didn't have in my head right now. You know?
How could you not like Rudy Giuliani? I mean, you'd have to be some kind of anti-American, liberal, pinko commie.
Sam Walton's Walmart was an American company, but something's changed. Today, Walmart is the #1 importer of Chinese goods. Walmart drives American companies to shut down plants and move manufacturing to China. And every day, as our trade deficit grows and good-paying middle-class American jobs are shipped overseas, Walmart in China gets stronger. America gets weaker. Walmart. It's just not American anymore. Go to wakeupwalmart.com and tell Walmart it's time to be American again.
Ian Dolan.
Angela Stevens.
Kirk Hansen. My name is Jay Patterson, and I'm proud to work for Halliburton.
My name's Ben Carter, and within the first week of being in Iraq, I knew that that wasn't going to be the company that I wanted to be with. Halliburton was hired to provide clean, safe cooking, cleaning, shower water for the military. One of Halliburton's employees saw something wiggling in the water in his toilet bowl. So I went and tested the water in our water storage tanks. There was no chlorine in them. None. The water we showered in every single day was extremely contaminated. And when I talk about contaminated water, I'm saying malaria, typhus, giardia, cryptosporidium. I mean, the list is really, really long.
Halliburton is accused by its own employees of exposing troops to contaminated water in Iraq.
When I tried to notify the troops that they may be exposed to a serious health risk, I was told that the military was none of my concern.
They were only concerned with making their profit and didn't care how it may affect the troops. Of the 67 water treatment plants that Halliburton run, 63 of them weren't providing safe water. And the Marines are showering in it every single day. Sorry. I was there to help them. There's a lot of soldiers over there. They might come home without a bullet wound, but there's a lot of them that are going to come home with pathogens in their blood.
How come you don't go to the chow hall? How much time you spend online?
At least
an hour. An hour for food?
An hour in the sandstorm for food.
Tell me about that line over there. What line am I looking at right now?
That line is for the chow hall, where you eat.
Several times dining halls were attacked. All it takes is one Iraqi that's an insurgent, and because they knew what times we were going to eat every day, they knew when to expect to hit. And that happens because KBR won't go to a 24-hour feeding schedule where they just always have food ready. They won't do it because it saves them money. Because they get paid by how many soldiers they feed, not by how many soldiers they save.
Feeding the troops. The Pentagon has found some serious problems with Halliburton's work on that contract as well.
Pentagon auditors found that a Halliburton contract to provide food and housing for American troops had a staggering $1.8 billion in unsupported costs.
It was all a scam. Halliburton was charging $45 for a six-pack can of Coke or Pepsi that they give us and the military free in the mess hall.
Now, these sodas were made right there in the desert. It's not as if they were brought over from the United States. These sodas were made with Arabic wraps, you know, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, whatever, right there in the desert. So it's not as if they had an exorbitant transportation rate.
They had the little mobile units that we had to put our clothes in, like a net duffel bag. Halliburton charged the government $100 for every bag of clothes they washed.
Whenever we got our laundry back, it felt worse than when we turned it in. Everything was still grimy. I stopped taking my laundry into KBR, and instead, I was washing it in the sink. And I was told by my chain of command that I was not allowed to wash my laundry on my own. I had to take it to KBR to have it washed, even though we all knew that they were doing a horrible job because they get $99 a bag for a bag of laundry that I could do at home for $3.
A legal way of stealing from the government or taxpayers' money.
The Pentagon audit released last night that found the company is overcharging taxpayers.
Halliburton Company billed taxpayers for its contract work in Iraq.
It is your money that's being used.
These contracts are managed under a system called Cost Plus, which is the opposite of trying to save money. It guarantees that everything that you buy will be paid back and reimbursed if it's seen as justified, and you'll be given a profit in addition.
A cost-plus arrangement that critics say leaves little incentive to save. The more taxpayer dollars Halliburton spends, the more Halliburton makes.
Cost Plus encourages you to run up the cost of a program because you are going to get a percentage of the end result. And so there's no incentive to stay at Motel 6. Stay at the Ritz-Carlton in Qatar, folks.
The place that they chose for orientation in Kuwait was a huge resort set right on the ocean. Had, I think, 3 swimming pools.
So it was better than the Wyndham in Texas or the Ritz. It was fancied up.
Marble floors, mahogany woodwork. It was just beautiful.
They had Sea-Doos, jet skis they could use.
You could go and rent wave runners and go out and play in the water.
We were renting wave runners, and we got paid by the hour to do it. I was told this: don't question it, enjoy it.
Several government agencies are currently investigating if Halliburton overcharged for work already completed in Iraq.
They had 5-star meals catered in every day.
It was so lavish. Rows of vegetable platters, beef platters, fish platters.
It's a cost-plus contract. KBR looked at it, the more money we spend, that's more money we get in our pockets.
We had it made over there compared to the military. I mean, those guys were living in tents, and we had air-conditioned private hooches.
The tents that we were staying in were completely moldy, and everybody was getting sick with respiratory infections. They're getting paid millions of dollars. Why can't they even give us a tent that doesn't make us sick to live in it?
The soldiers are sleeping on these little cots out in the middle of the desert, while these KBR executives are driving these $40,000 vehicles.
They and their secretaries are driving at least a $30,000 to $40,000 vehicle. This secretary lives in this complex, eats her meals in this complex, has her laundry delivered to her, has no reason to go anywhere at any time, but has a brand new top-of-the-line Ford or Chevy pickup with everything imaginable on it that you could put on it.
Chrome rims and leather interior and CD players and all these extra amenities that, you know, you don't really need in wartime.
Why do they need an H-2 Hummer? Why do they have Cadillac Escalades in Iraq for Halliburton managers? What is the purpose?
One invoice that I saw was for about $7,000 for 1 month for a SUV on a lease. It was a 3-year contract. Comes up to roughly $250,000. A vehicle that you and I could purchase at the local dealership for probably top of the line $45,000. And the taxpayer paid $250,000 and never did own the vehicle.
They got the wrong equipment, ordered the wrong stuff, computers still in boxes, new vehicles. They'd push them out in what they called burn pits, and they just set it on fire, claim it as a loss, get more money for the right equipment or the right stuff they needed.
Why would you need to order somebody else's wrong equipment just because somebody pays you to do it, and you burn it and destroy it?
You got brand new trucks over there, and there's not even oil filters. So when the motor blows, what do? Buy a new truck and build the government.
$75,000 truck. They wouldn't even have a spare tire to fit it, and we had to blow it.
Boarding, not to be confused with wakeboarding or water skiing. Waterboarding, an enhanced interrogation technique.
What's up, guy?
Make sure your subject is securely fastened. Pull tightly on the shackle, making sure it's snug. Step 2. Blindfold your subject. Duct tape can be used, though a black mask is preferred. You can make your own by spray painting an old pair of swim goggles. If you have access to office supplies, feel free to go ahead and apply binder clips to the subject's eyelids. Step 3. Insert a hand towel into the subject's mouth, making sure to penetrate the passageway and make contact with the epiglottis. Step 4. Stimulate the epiglottis. Small circular motions are often quite effective. Step 5. Pour water, lukewarm in temperature, onto the towel.
Thirsty?
Apply generously, allowing some water to splash and drip onto the subject's skin and clothes. This will aid in the overall drowning look and feel. Step 6. Continue pouring water on the towel. If you're lucky enough to have an assistant, feel free to instruct him or her to pour additional water over the remainder of the subject's body. The moisture that's being absorbed by the towel will unavoidably trigger the gag reflex. Once this occurs, pay close attention to what one may refer to in football as an open. Once the subject seems open to inquiry, politely begin your line of questioning.
What the fuck do you know about me?
Step 7. If the answers to your questions prove unsatisfactory, we encourage you to proceed to the advanced levels of the technique. Cover the subject's face with a thin sheet of plastic. Saran wrap will do, making sure all airways are properly sealed. Then, with your finger, poke a small hole in the subject's mouth, which will not only allow breathing, but also provide a more adequate space to pack his or her mouth full of water. If you follow these instructions closely and executed them with a modicum of precision, at this point the subject will have lost total control of motor skills, muscles, and bowels. We have this saying, the smell of victory is the smell of excrement.
Maybe you didn't know anything.
Next. Thank you for watching.
When these guys are talking...
The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
You really think that will get any leeway?
You may want to visit a couple of websites and see how far along it is. The Canadians are pretty upset about it, whereas the Americans, apart from the Texans, are the only people who know anything about it. The rest of the public's really sort of with their head in the sand on this one.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we've already got NAFTA, the free trade zone, isn't? I mean, is that working? Is that doing enough?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's created a lot of illegal immigrants coming across the border. I don't know. You get the pros and cons on this thing. NAFTA, for some people, is a very good thing. For other people, it's been a disaster. And I think this is one way that the politicians are trying to work themselves out of what potentially could be a disastrous situation going forward.
House of Representatives has passed the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act by a 404-6 vote.
H.R. 1955, as I understand it, provides a basis for subjective interpretation of dissident speech that allows those in power to criminally penalize anything they consider to be particularly effective in terms of galvanizing an opposition that might conceivably, in some sense, disrupt or destabilize the status quo.
Welcome to Now. Members of Congress spent the week expressing their views on the Bush administration's plans for Iraq. But there is another war, now deep into its 6th year, that also bears continued and close examination. It's the one dubbed the global war on terror. It is also an expensive war, both in terms of cash and, many would argue, in terms of personal rights and liberties. You heard about the government secretly listening in on phone conversations without a warrant, but there is evidence that your email is also being tapped. Brian Myers produced our report. Here's a question. How many emails did you deal with today? 10, 20, maybe more? Now multiply your answer times every American who's online. It's estimated that people in this country send billions of emails each day. True, a lot of emails are junk, but others hold our innermost thoughts. They share intimacies, our complaints, or maybe our political opinions. And if you think your emails are private, prepare to watch and learn about a number of cases that each raise questions about how the government may be going through electronic mail. There is evidence the government has been intercepting most emails as part of its terrorist surveillance program. That program has been criticized as illegal because it's missing an important ingredient: search warrants.
Your emails and my emails and everybody else's emails were evidently going to a government room. The issue...
James Brosnahan is an attorney. He represents this man, Mark Klein. For 22 years, Klein worked as a technician for the largest telecommunications company in America, AT&T. Several years ago, Klein says he came to suspect that AT&T had installed secret computer gear designed to spy on internet traffic at the request of the National Security Agency, or NSA.
Hello. Well, hi. The House passes Thought Crime Prevention Bill. Yeah, that's what I said. Thought Crime Prevention Bill. You ever thought we'd be saying that, folks? Well, we are. 404 congressional representatives directly violated their oath to uphold the U.S. Constitution. The U.S. House of Representatives recently passed H.R. 1955, titled the Violent Radicalization and Homegrown Terrorism Prevention Act of 2007. This bill is one of the most blatant attacks against the Constitution yet, and actually defines thought crimes as homegrown terrorism. If passed into law, it will also establish a commission and a center of excellence to study and defeat so-called thought criminals. Unlike previous anti-terror legislation, this bill specifically targets the civilian population of the U.S. and uses vague language to define homegrown terrorism. Amazingly, 404 of our elected representatives from both the Democrat and Republican parties voted in favor of this bill. They voted in favor of it, folks. That's the condition our condition is in Congress now. They're all just shitting all over the Constitution. Just shitting all over it. Okay? There's little doubt that this bill is specifically targeting the growing patriot community that is demanding the restoration of the Constitution. Section 899B of the bill goes over the findings of Congress as it pertains to homegrown terrorism. Particularly alarming is that the bill mentions the Internet as a main source for terrorist propaganda. Oh yes, here it comes, folks, the Internet. The bill even mentions streams in obvious reference to many of the patriot and pro-Constitution Internet radio networks that have been formed. It also mentions that homegrown terrorists span all ages and races, indicating that the Congress is stating that everyone is a potential terrorist. Why, of course they are. Why, of course, I know that me and Homie are probably potential terrorists, wouldn't you say? Even worse is that Congress states in their findings that they should look at draconian police states like Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom as models to defeat homegrown terrorists. Literally, these findings of Congress fall right in line with the growing patriot community. This bill is completely insane. Insane. It literally allows the government to define any and all crimes, including thought crime, as violent radicalization and homegrown terrorism. It's Nazi Germany all over again, folks. Bush Hitler. Obviously, this legislation is unconstitutional on a number of levels, and it is clear that all 404 representatives who voted in favor of this bill are traitors and should be removed from office immediately.
Let's remember, I stand for freedom. Let me give it to you this way, Donnie. If America is changing because of the war on terrorism, then the terrorists are winning. Because we may be beating them on the battlefield, but if we're getting our freedoms taken away and America changes because of what terrorisms do, the fear of terrorism, and government there to protect us, well, then, in my opinion, the terrorists are winning.
But Jesse, you have to admit, if we don't do something, the reality is terrorism is a new kind of war, and it's nothing we've faced in our over 200-year history. And some things have to be done differently. This is a different kind of enemy, and to put your head in the sand and say, we can't change anything, I just think it's ignorant.
Wait a minute. Nobody's putting their head in the sand. We're as ill-prepared for terrorism as we've ever been. Take a look at the hurricanes that just hit this country. They were even announced 3 to 4 days ahead of time. Okay. Now, when the terrorists hit us, do you think they're going to send us a memo telling us 3 to 4 days ahead of time we're going to hit you? Get prepared. We couldn't even handle what happened in New Orleans, and yet we're being sold by our politicians that we're safer today, that we're out there protecting you. We've got this big government bureaucratic agency on terrorism that's going to protect you. It's a bunch of hogwash, Donnie, and if you believe it, you're naive.
Jesse, you once said you think there should be a restaurant in the White House 2008, so you're the guy in charge now. How do we make ourselves safer from terrorism? It's easy to throw stones. Give me some answers. Yeah.
Well, the first thing would be to go get a terrorist that attacked us. You know, we're never successful until bin Laden is 7 feet under. Okay. And instead, we're now fighting in Iraq, a country that never attacked us. There wasn't one terrorist in 9/11 from Iraq. Okay. 15 of the 19 were from Saudi Arabia. 48% of the insurgents you hear about in Iraq right now are Saudis. Why are we fighting the Iraqis? It's about the same. If we went back to World War II for a moment, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, maybe we should have attacked Korea. After all, they're Asian too. Mm-hmm.
Look,
that's the mindset that was used here.
You wouldn't get an argument from this show. Strategically, that was certainly not the most judicious way to spend $200 billion to fight terrorism. But so what do we do? Okay, let's say now you got to go get bin Laden. Why can't we find this guy? This is the one question I don't understand. He's a 6'6" Arab guy. We have unlimited funds to spend. You put $1 billion on his head as a reward. Why can't we get this guy?
Because I don't think we want him that bad.
Tell me what makes you say that. Why don't we want him that bad?
Because we should have gotten him. That's what tells me that. We've had since 9/11/01 to get this guy, and we failed miserably.
In our Health Watch this morning, for some of America's 25 million veterans, their biggest fight isn't on the battlefield, but here at home. CBS News investigative correspondent Armin Katayan with the story of an alarming suicide rate among veterans.
His exact words is, "Your son has died."
Staff Sergeant Justin Reyes spent a violent year serving in Iraq. Gene Willis and Carlos Reyes are his parents.
The war didn't end for him when he came home.
Medical records show Justin suffered severe psychological trauma after witnessing multiple dead and having to sort through badly mutilated bodies. Earlier this year, 1 month after separating from the Army, Justin hanged himself with a cord in his apartment at just 26.
I think he was being tormented and tortured by his experiences.
I'm Armin. Nice to meet you. Gene Willis and members of 4 other families recently sat down to talk about losing loved ones, all veterans of Iraq, to suicide.
Was there any sense that they were having problems at all?
I said, "What's the matter, Tim?" I said, "Don't you want to come home?" And he said, "I'm not sure." He said, "Everything's changed." He said, "I'm not the same person anymore."
Mia Sagahan's boyfriend, Walter, shot himself at age 27, about a year and a half after he came back from Iraq.
I just didn't realize that I didn't think he was thinking about killing himself. Otherwise, I would have taken him wherever he needed to go.
I think that's what the families are left with, the guilt of what we could have done and what we should have done.
Guilt and anger. No one had ever counted just how many suicides there are nationwide among those who have served in the military until now. A 5-month CBS News investigation based upon a detailed analysis of data obtained from death records in 2004 and 5 found this. Overall, veterans were more than twice as likely to commit suicide in 2005 as non-vets. Part of a set of numbers that stunned everyone from Senator Patty Murray.
That's a lot of young men and women who've gone to fight for us, who've come home and found themselves that lost.
To veteran rights advocate Paul Sullivan.
And this is pulling the fire alarm to say our veterans need help now.
Joining me now, Armin Katayan. Armin, this report out by the Department of Veteran Affairs says that approximately this year 5,000 veterans will commit suicide, largely because of mental health issues.
Yeah.
This sounds shockingly high. That's like 100 a week.
It is, and actually I interviewed the person that did it, Dr. Irv Katz, who's the head of mental health for the VA, and he described it as a back of the envelope estimate, and I can tell you, Julie, our numbers are much higher than that overall.
And you'll have more tonight on the Evening News?
Much more tonight on the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Armin Katayan.
I have served a tour in Iraq, so I hope that when you hear me say the things that I do, that you'll believe me. I'm just not talking out of my ass. I'm just getting tired of people covering up the truth. And I'm especially upset with my fellow Christian brothers and sisters, because they are being paralyzed from trying to find the truth. And they're using their own religion to bind their hands and their feet, when Christians have been the most active people in the history of the world. Martin Luther King is a prime example. He didn't sit back and let these atrocities go on. He stood up. But you must open your eyes. The great deception that here is terrorists, they're trying to attack us, Why do you live in fear that these men would all of a sudden jump on a raft, swim across the ocean, and come kill us with sticks and stones? Why? Why can't we come home and let them do what they gotta do? And if there would ever challenge us, we fight them militarily. But if we shut our borders like we're supposed to, we shouldn't be worried about this. Israel has the most powerful military in the Middle East. That is the deception that we must protect Israel. Indeed we must, but they are protected. We need to wake up. While they're waving the flag over here, the terrorist flag over here, they're stealing from your pockets right here. $1 trillion stolen from the American taxpayer. To KBR, Blackwater, and all these companies that are operating. And I've seen it with my own eyes. KBR, Kellogg, Brown and Root, a subsidiary company of Halliburton, has been contracted, no bid contracted, overcharging the government. They have been accused of waste and fraud several times. And what they do everything in Iraq. If you're a soldier and you don't know who KBR is, then I don't believe you have been to Iraq. They're in charge of everything. They're contracted from top to bottom. And in turn, what do? They subcontract companies from Saudi Arabia, who in turn hire cheap labor. I've seen it with my own eyes. Not only are they overcharging the government, but they're exploiting cheap labor. They pay these third country nationals close to $250 to $350 per month. Imagine that. Exploiting cheap labor and overcharging the government. And these third country nationals are from countries like India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, the Philippines, and even Pakistan. And we know right now that Pakistan could be harboring terrorists. They have nuclear weapons and whatnot. And if they want to sell this terrorist thing, then let me ask you this. Why would you hire people that have Muslim background when you haven't screened their background, you don't know what background they're coming, and you hire them to come work inside the base? If you're so worried about security, why would you hire them to come inside the base, is what I'm asking. Why would you hire cheap labor and jeopardize a soldier's life? Why not hire American citizens? Why? Because it would cost too much money for them. And why aren't our armed soldiers doing the same thing? Blackwater, private security. Why can't soldiers do that job? Why must they get paid so much money and the contracts be outrageous? Why do you need to privatize that? Why? And the worst part is, a soldier commits something wrong, he gets UCMJ, and he gets court-martialed. These private securities do something wrong? No, they don't have to respond to anybody. They get a slap in the hand. At Abu Ghraib, what happened to the soldiers that did the wrongful things? They got UCMJ and they got in trouble. And their supervisors who were civilian, they got slapped in the hand. How fair is that? How fair is that? Soldiers are second-class citizens in Iraq to these private contractors. They get their own vehicles, $60,000 vehicles. They don't have to wear a uniform. They can do whatever the hell they want while soldiers are being scrutinized. We need to wake up. What is going on? They're stealing from American citizens, from the American taxpayer. That's what they're doing. And I refuse to put my life on the line so they can steal from the same people that I'm supposed to be serving. From the 75% people that want me home, they're stealing from, and the other 25%. And if you're Christian, you need to stop letting them paralyze you from acting. While they're waving the flag of terrorism here, they're stealing from you. We need to wake up. Wake up. CNN and Fox are not going to show you the truth. They're not going to show you the truth. Just let yourself go there. Just let yourself face the facts. If you don't accept them, fine. But face the facts. Face the fact that we're going in debt. Face the fact that the United States is going to build the most expensive embassy ever in Iraq. Face the facts. Face the facts that Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, and Saddam Hussein didn't have anything to do with Al-Qaeda. What do we say? Oops. Oops. We bought it, so now we have to pay for it and we got to take it because we broke it? Nah, that's the wrong answer. That's the wrong answer. I don't believe that I'm living in a democracy anymore. I do not believe that I'm living in a democracy anymore. When the people who I serve, the people who I'm protecting, want me home, and they can't get me home, and they can't do anything to bring me home, yet all 75% want me to come home, and want my fellow soldiers to come home. It's a great deception, and they're stealing from us. They're stealing from us, and you're not going to find the truth from anything that you see on TV. If you're a Fox or CNN zombie, you need to wake up, snap out of it. If you're a Christian, you need to seriously pray about it. And I would ask you one thing if you're a Christian. What would Jesus do? More than 1 million innocent civilians have died in Iraq. Whether it was us or bombs that we dropped or some of the insurgents. It is all because we attacked Iraq. Regardless, it's a consequence. What would Jesus say? Close to 5,000 soldiers, or something of that nature, soldiers had died. But what about these innocent civilians too? They're human beings. Our lives are worth no more than their lives. God created us all. Where's their voice? Do they have a voice about what they want in their country? Let's wake up, America. Let's wake up. For God's sake, wake up. Go find soldiers and ask them what they think. And ask them about their experiences. Go and watch Iraq for Sale. Again, go watch Iraq for Sale. After watching the documentary, if you still feel good about sending soldiers overseas, then you have the right to believe that. But all I ask is that you would watch the documentary, because that's what I've seen. That's what I've experienced. Why do you need brand new 2007 Chevys fully loaded in Iraq in the desert when they're not armored and they can't go outside the base? Why are we buying all this? Because they're in a contract what is called cost plus. The more they spend, the more money they get. So what they do, they just buy all kinds of stuff they don't need. They waste. It's out there. It's out there. I've witnessed it with my own eyes. Wake up.
Uncle Sam says turn in your coins. Now that President Bush has declared martial law, it will be illegal to be in possession of precious metals after the first of the year. That's why all citizens are urged to redeem their coins at any of the over 48,000 Halliburton service stations throughout the United States. We call it Operation Change for the Better, and for good reason. First, the new money is based on a petroleum standard, so the coins will appear in gallon denominations instead of dollars, which makes sense since that's where most of your income goes anyway. Let's familiarize ourselves with the new coins, starting with the 10-gallon denomination, which features the president's mother, Barbara Bush, who will forever be remembered for single-handedly changing the world's perspective by noting that the refugees of Hurricane Katrina were better off after the disaster than before. This happy fact is memorialized on the reverse with the adorable image of 2 lost children paddling past the Superdome. The 5-gallon coin celebrates our comatose press and the 5th anniversary of Larry King's momentous interview with Elizabeth Taylor on the eve of the Iraq War. This coin is also known as the buffaloed press nickel because of the American bison on the reverse butting heads with the liberal media. The 1-gallon coin, or the Condi, honors Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, whose solution to Middle East conflict is summarized on the reverse, piping Persia for peace. The half-gallon coin, or the Scalia, depicts the Supreme Court justice against a backdrop of uncounted Florida ballots, while on the reverse, presidential advisor Karl Rove celebrates the modern miracle of electronic voting. Finally, there's the one cup coin, or the Bracero, honoring the millions of aliens the president welcomed into the American labor pool. It features the unknown Bracero on the front, while on the back, more illegals jumped the border in Roger Clark Wilson's Gateway to Servitude. Yes, a fitting tribute to big business's final triumph over organized labor. The larger denominations begin with the 25-gallon Royal Limbaugh. Celebrating uniformity of speech, it features a Greco-Roman interpretation of commentators Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, and Ann Coulter, under the banner One Media, One Voice. The 50-gallon coin pays homage to Donald Rumsfeld and the concept of democracy at gunpoint. The 75-gallon coin features Vice President Cheney and the creed for which he's dedicated the bulk of his public life, In Greed We Trust. On the reverse, an American eagle and the price of gas engage in a symbolic race for the moon. Finally, there's the 100-gallon coin, or the Bush doubloon. The presidential credo, fighting terrorism by creating it, is featured. While on the reverse, the events of 9/11 are recalled under the motto, lest they forget, we'll remind. Here, a new World Trade Center rises from the ashes of the Pentagon, crusted by the men of Iwo Jima. On the right, Vice President Cheney is seen canceling North American fighter cover. While on the left, the president reads My Pet Goat to Florida kindergartners. Yes, it's a vivid snapshot of that fateful day, captured for all time in 100% depleted uranium. Be among the first to redeem coins worth 100 gallons or more and receive this limited edition doubloon featuring President Bush along with Presidents Hoover and Harding, kindred leaders who also labored under a plundered economy. Yes, it's out with the old, in with the new. Operation Change for the Better from the United States government and Halliburton, working together to round up every cent you have.
Sometimes a nation's descent into moral depravity is marked by a sudden event, a coup, for instance. Other times the signposts are smaller, subtler increments, such as the third story on our countdown tonight. CTV in Canada has obtained a list the Canadian government has given to its diplomats, instructing them how to deal with Canadian prisoners in countries that use torture. Countries, the list says, that include Syria, Iran, and the United States of America. The list was generated after the U.S. seized the Canadian Maher Arar in New York in 2002 and sent him to Syria, where he was tortured for a year based on false information. Also in 2002, a 15-year-old Canadian, Omar Khadr, was taken to Guantanamo Bay, which is also included in the Canadian torture list. His lawyers say he, too, has been tortured, something the U.S. denies. Putting aside the fact America has held a teenager captive without trial and that no country has held anyone younger than 18 responsible for war crimes ever before, still we are left to confront the fact that we now live in a world where diplomats are instructed in how to detect whether their citizens in our custody have been tortured, specifically subjected to forced nudity, isolation, and sleep deprivation, among other things. Diplomats from Canada. Let's turn now to Charles Swift, formerly of the Navy's JAG Corps, where he served as defense counsel in the landmark U.S. versus Hamdan case. Commander Swift, once again, thanks for some of your time tonight.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
What's the significance of this list, especially given that it is Canada's list, and especially if other countries follow suit in creating lists of their own like this with us on it?
The biggest significance right now is it's visible evidence of something that former Secretary of State Colin Powell had warned of, the current Secretary of State has warned of, the Secretary of Defense has warned of, that Guantanamo Bay and our interrogation practices are making it hard for them to do their jobs. When they go into a diplomatic meeting, they have to deal with this. It becomes the first thing on the agenda, and it starts to jeopardize cooperation in intelligence gathering, police work, and ultimately potentially extradition and other issues. So what it is it's showing the visible evidence that what Colin Powell told the country when he said we need to close Guantanamo Bay today is accurate, because if Canada is putting us on the list, one of our closest allies with whom we've always shared a common heritage, we're in trouble diplomatically, and they're not kidding around, and the longer we persist, the worse things get.
The U.S., obviously, the administration has denied torturing Omar Khadr or anybody else. You have an answer to this question? Why don't those denials hold any water with the Canadians?
Well, in the world community, it's starting to become like Iran denying that they have a nuclear weapons program. The question always is, well, let us inspect it. Let us take a look at it. The country replies, no, that's national security. We're not going to do that. And people become suspect. Plus, we have reports that are credible, that waterboarding, that forced nudity, and prolonged isolation are what we're doing. And while we may parse this legally, they're not parsing it legally in Europe. They're not parsing it legally in Canada, and they're not parsing it legally in Great Britain and our other allies. They call it for what it is, torture. And this debate, which for us seems to continue politically in Congress, is over in Europe. And it's over in Canada. We're losing it there. It's done.
Commander, in case anybody hasn't gotten the message yet, morality aside, purely on the basis of effectiveness, why shouldn't the U.S. use torture in interrogations?
Well, two reasons. One, it doesn't work. For all those who say, well, I got information, you have no idea as to its credibility. You forced the information out. You have no idea whether it was true or not. Number two is when you use these tactics, you lose your friends. And friends are what's absolutely essential in combating a problem like terrorism. The United States does not want to be the only nation left with combating terrorism and be on the outside. We have to have our friends. And Canada is one of our closest. You know, the Millennium Bomber came from Canada. We share a common border. We need cooperation. These two, it's a common problem that we have to work together on. And if they're placed in a position where politically Canada cannot work with us, we're in much more danger than we were before.
This week we heard from Congress that the CIA's clandestine operation director, Jose Rodriguez, had been told, don't destroy the Bangkok station chief's tapes, in which two of the suspected al-Qaeda members, including Abu Zubaydah, were subjected to waterboarding. Rodriguez denies that claim. All of this reportedly, at least in part, to prevent the world from actually seeing Americans torturing captive men. Does destroying our tapes mitigate how we're seen overseas, or does it push us further into the realm of the rogue nation status?
I think it pushes us farther into the realm. This is a case where the crime is worse than the cover-up, but in the world's part, we're not going to regain credibility. And I think the timing of that was this particular species when one gets down to Guantanamo and the trials. The tapes were destroyed weeks after the D.C. Circuit cleared commissions to restart. Now, the Supreme Court took the case and stopped the commissions eventually, but there was real concern in the CIA that the tapes would eventually be shown down in the commissions and be ruled as torture. So one of the problems that continues through this whole part is that we can't come clean. And as long as we can't come clean, the worst will be thought of us.
Charles Swift, former lieutenant commander in the Navy, now law professor at Emory University. Professor, great thanks for your time again.
Thank you.
Well, I think Bush is probably the worst president in the history of the United States, and I just don't understand how they could have lost that election. Is there a way out? The war is a total disaster. It's a catastrophe, nothing less. It is such a shame that this took place. In fact, I gained a lot of respect for our current president's father by the fact that he had the sense not to go into Iraq. He won the war and then said, let's not go the rest of the way, and he turned out to be right. And Saddam Hussein, whether they like him or didn't like him, he hated terrorists. He'd shoot and kill terrorists. When terrorists came into this country, which he did control and he did dominate, he would kill terrorists. Now it's a breeding ground for terrorists. So, look, the war is a total catastrophe.
Who do you blame?
And they have a civil war going on.
Who do you blame?
Well, there's only one person you can blame, and that's our current president. I mean, obviously, Rumsfeld was a disaster, and other people that are giving him advice have been a disaster. And Condoleezza Rice, who's a lovely woman, but she never makes a deal. She doesn't make deals. She waves. She gets off the plane. She waves. She sits down with some dictator, 45-degree angle. They do the camera shot. She waves again. She gets back on the plane. She waves. No deal ever happens. So, I mean,
you got to close the deal at some point.
You got to make deals. The world is dying to make deals, and we don't have the right people doing it.
The Vice President, Dick Cheney.
Well, he's obviously a very hawkish guy on the war. He said the war was going fantastically just a few months ago, and, you know, it's just very sad. I don't know if they're bad people. I don't know what's going on. I just know that they got us into a mess, the likes of which this country has probably never seen. It's one of the great catastrophes of all time, and perhaps even worse, the rest of the world hates us. You go throughout Europe. I travel. I do deals all over the world. The Europeans hate us. You go to Germany. You go to England. You go to places that, you know, we didn't have problems with. They all hate the Americans because of what's happened. We had a chance after September 11th to be the most popular, for the first time ever, to be the most popular nation on earth, and we blew it. Everybody, for the first time, people felt sympathy. I'm not saying it's a great thing to have sympathy in terms of yourself, but for the first time they felt a sympathy and a love for this country because of what happened. And we blew it.
How does the United States get out of this situation? Is there a,
how do they get out?
way out
you know
of
how they get out? They get out. That's how they get out. Declare victory and leave. Because I'll tell you, this country is just going to get further bogged down. They're in a civil war over there, Wolf. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do with a civil war. They are in a major civil war, and it's going to go to Iran, and it's going to go to other countries. They are in the midst of a major civil war, and there's nothing. And by the way, we're keeping the lid on a little bit, but the day we leave anyway, it's all going to blow up. And Saddam Hussein will be a nice person compared to the man, and it will be a man, it will not be a woman. That we understand. People say, oh, gee, you didn't give the women a chance. It will be a man. Compared to the person that takes over for Saddam Hussein, he will be considered a nice person. This guy will be the meanest, the worst guy, and he'll have one thing. He will hate America, and he'll use that to flame. So, I mean, this is a total catastrophe, and you might as well get out now because you're just wasting time. And lives. You know, nobody talks about the soldiers that are coming back with no arms and no legs. And I saw at Mar-a-Lago on Mondays, I make Mar-a-Lago my club that you know about.
In Palm Beach.
I make that twice now. On a Monday, I let returning Iraqi injured soldiers come to the premises. The most beautiful people I've ever seen. But they're missing arms and legs. They're with their wives. Sometimes they're with their girlfriends. And the tears are coming down the faces of these people. I mean, the thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands. And the Iraqis that have been just maimed and killed. This war is a horrible thing. Now, President Bush says he's religious. And yet 400,000 people, the way I count it, have died. And probably millions have been badly maimed and injured. What's going on? What's going on? And the day we pull out, it's going to explode. We're keeping the lid on a little bit. It's still a catastrophe. But the day we pull out, because they're in a civil war, whether we want to admit it or not, they're in a civil war.
What do you think of some of these scandals that are unfolding in Washington right now? As we speak, the Attorney General is under fire, Alberto Gonzales. What do you make of this as an executive trying to watch an administration?
Look, everything in Washington has been a lie. Weapons of mass destruction was a total lie. It was a way of attacking Iraq, which he thought was going to be easy, and it turned out to be the exact opposite of easy. He reads 60 books a year. He reads a book a week. Do you think the president reads a book a week? I don't think so. He doesn't watch television. Now, one thing I know is that when I'm on television, I watch, or I try. Because you do. Your own ego says, you know, let's watch. Let's see whether it's good or bad. You want to watch, right? He doesn't watch television. So he's on television being interviewed by you or somebody else. He doesn't watch. Does anybody really believe that? Now they're doing this whole scandal with the U.S. attorneys. Now they're finding emails. And it's proven to be a lie. Everything's a lie. It's all a big lie.
So what's going to happen?
Well, it depends. If the Democrats get their act together, they're going to have a big victory in a couple of years. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this whole thing with the Attorney General. It's a very sad situation.
What's next for Donald Trump?
Well, I just want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm having a great time. I'm building all over the world. I'm having a really great time. And it's been a lot of fun. And it's always fun to be interviewed by you.
Thanks for doing it.
Thank you.
What is this issue of security? I mean, we move into the technology, and it gets even more frightening.
Yes, that's true. And these machines are very hackable, so if a machine is unsupervised for more than a minute, someone could get to it and put in a virus or a hack.
This is crazy.
Exactly. In fact, I learned firsthand from Princeton Professor Edward Felton just how easy it is. This is a Diebold TS machine that is used pretty widely around the country, and this is a hackable machine, is it not?
It takes only about a minute with an unsupervised machine to insert the virus. The voting machine virus is on this memory card. All of the machines apparently use the same key. Anyone who can get the door open and stick in a memory card can insert a virus or do whatever they like.
Why don't you show me first how the machine works?
One of the things they can do is what's called logic and accuracy testing. which is basically holding a pretend election. The virus is not kicking in yet. It's just lurking in the background. In this case, we have a race for president between George Washington and Benedict Arnold. And so I'll cast a test vote for George Washington.
I'm going to be just renegade and vote for Benedict Arnold just for the fun of it.
Okay. Now, if you look here in the middle, it has the count, the vote count for our testing. George Washington, 1 vote. Benedict Arnold, 1 vote.
Now we're hackers. We just did the test checked out. Now we're hackers.
Yes. But this is the screen that a voter sees on election day when they show up to vote. You've checked in at the front desk. Here's your voter card.
Okay, so for real, I have to vote for George Washington.
Of course.
Of course.
We can cast a few more votes in our election if you like.
I'm going to vote for George Washington. And we do George Washington again.
This virus has been instructed to steal the election for Benedict Arnold. The records have been modified so that the records inside the voting machine show 2 votes for Benedict Arnold and 1 vote for George Washington.
So prove that it stole it. What we see is that we don't have 3 votes for George Washington. So this machine has been highly compromised.
This machine has been highly compromised. It counts the votes wrong.
This particular voting machine in an election has a virus.
Yes.
That's only one machine. How does that, if someone really has malicious intent, how does that go from machine to machine?
The way it spreads is on the removable memory cards. At the end of election day, if this card is taken back to headquarters and it's put into a machine back there, the central election headquarters can be a sort of vector for the virus to spread.
What do you think of this machine?
Well, it's not a very secure machine.
The Diebold machines we tested do not have a paper trail. The record tape on the inside of the machine can be altered by the virus, and there is no other record of how someone voted. Once they walk away, that vote can be lost or stolen, Lou.
How long did it take the folks at Princeton to figure out how to do this?
Well, they got the machine, but it took them about a month to do it, and they did it with 1 professor and 2 graduate students. It didn't take them very long.
This is enough, I would think, to worry just about anyone responsible for an election. Thanks very much.
We don't need y'all running around just saying what you think, okay? I mean, that stuff is infectious, all right? If we let you say whatever the hell you want to, then that means he's going to want to say whatever the hell he wants to.
Douglas Bickford here. I'm the guy on the internet calling George Bush a fucking terrorist. Fuck Bush, that's how I feel. Now look what's on our money. You all know me because I'm radical. I tell everybody about the money. Okay, $20 bill. Can you see that? 9/11 is on our money. 9/11. It's an atrocity. Now check this out. American flight on that side was one of the planes. United flight was one of the planes. United 11. American flight 175. Okay, coincidence? I don't think so. It's fucking Bush. He's a fucking terrorist. He killed us. 3,000 of us in the World Trade Centers.
You guys won't even investigate it.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay. Yeah, well, I just want you on the phone in case shooting starts or something. They had shotguns and weapons drawn on me.
Do you see any weapons drawn on you right now?
They were drawn. Are you telling me you didn't have your weapons drawn on me?
Okay.
Wait, are you lying to the... You did have your weapons out.
Yes.
There was a shotgun pointed at me.
Yes, Larry.
You had a pistol pointed at me.
Okay, and I don't anymore. Okay, well, we were...
Because this is bogus. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm calling my government for help. And this is the help I get.
We are here to help you.
Really?
Yes.
Then call Washington, D.C. about that guy that is not an FBI agent.
Okay, but before we do that, we need to come into the house, make sure that you and the girls are okay.
No, you're not coming in my house. You get a search warrant.
Thrown from the crowd, and police began pepper spraying people everywhere.
Police used pepper spray to break up an unruly crowd.
They respond with pepper spray when someone throws a bottle. Something was thrown from the crowd, and someone throws a bottle.
They repeated that mantra for days after this police riot. Someone threw a bottle. Everything was fine, everything was peaceful, but then someone threw a bottle. And that's what started this. In point of fact, that was a lie.
When 20th century scientists discovered the role DNA plays in heredity, they founded a new science called genetics that put Darwin's theory to the test. The cells of all great apes, like chimpanzees, gorillas, and orangutans, contain 24 pairs of chromosomes. If humans share a common ancestor with apes, you'd expect us to have the same number. But surprisingly, human cells contain only 23 pairs.
Now, if we share a common ancestry, what happened? Is it possible that in the line of evolution that led to us, a pair of chromosomes from a primate ancestor just got lost and just got discarded? Well, the answer to that is no. It's not possible. And the reason is because every primate chromosome has so many important genes on it that the loss of both members of a pair would be fatal. You wouldn't even get through embryonic development. So there's only one possible explanation. And that explanation is that in the line that led to us, two chromosomes that were separate in other primates became fused to form a single chromosome. And this is why evolution is a science. That possibility is testable. We ought to be able to look at our genomes and find that we carry a chromosome with the marks of that fusion on it. Now, how would we find that? It's easier than you might think.
Typically, on the ends of every chromosome, you should find special genetic markers, or sequences of DNA, called telomeres. And in their middles, you should find different genetic markers called centromeres. But if a mutation occurred in the past, causing two pairs of chromosomes to fuse, we should find evidence in those genetic markers. Telomeres not only at the ends of the new chromosome, but also at their middles, and not one, but two centromeres. Finding a structure like this in our chromosomes would explain why humans have one pair fewer than the great apes.
If we don't find it, then the case for common ancestry for our species might be refuted. But if we do find it, it would be powerful evidence in favor of evolution. So all we have to do is to scan the human genome and see, do we have a chromosome that has these marks, telomere DNA in the center and two centromeres? Well, the answer turns out to be we do. And it's human chromosome number 2. And the evidence is unmistakable. We've suspected this for a very long time, and in 2005, a definitive study was published showing that chromosome 2 has the exact fusion point, almost the point at which the Scotch tape holds those two chromosomes together can be found. The closer we look at our own DNA, the more detailed a glimpse we get of our own genome, the more powerful the evidence for our own evolution from common ancestry with other species becomes.
Dr. Doug Rockey is a U.S. Army Health Physicist and Nuclear Medical Sciences Officer. Dr. Rockey has expertise in nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare operations, microwave radiation, emergency response, decontamination, and battlefield cleanup.
We were the super garbage men. We had to clean up the messes. We had to identify the messes. We had to collect all the garbage. We had to provide the on-site medical care. It's a lot. All the Iraqi equipment, a lot of U.S. equipment, contains radiological components. When that equipment was blowing up, the radiological materials were released into the environment, exposing and contaminating. And then to top it all off, we used uranium munitions, known as depleted uranium. They've been used back in 1973 by the Israelis against the Egyptians, but during Gulf War I, Desert Shield and Desert Storm, we took it to a totally new level. The use of radioactive materials on the battlefield. Deliberately taken tons and tons, actually over 350 tons of solid radioactive materials, and dispersed it across Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Iraq. Taking our radioactive waste and throw it in somebody else's backyard.
What happens if your own government is using more force and more coercion on its own citizens for the purpose of achieving its political ends? Is that government engaged in terrorism?
American people expect us to protect them and protect their civil liberties. I'm going to do that.
What is being sold to the American people today as Americanism, if you peel off the label, you find so much similarity to what we were fighting against when we were fighting communism and Nazism and fascism.
The government's now putting a national ID card together.
We will be carrying our papers, and they have recommended there be checkpoints throughout the country. Some type of physical proof, such as fingerprints or retinal prints, have to be on it.
Desires of the people really have no consequence. They go out and they vote. Doesn't make any difference which candidate they elect.
Mr. Curtis, are there programs that can be used to secretly fix elections? Yes.
This is absolutely Orwellian. I mean, it's talking about Big Brother looking over your shoulder at absolutely everything you do.
There is no constitutional basis for a tax on the wages of Americans living and working in the 50 states of the Union. Period. End of argument.
If Americans just learned that the IRS was actually knowingly deceiving them, that would be enough for them to rise up and put a stop to it.
You caught me unprepared. I'll come back. Well, I don't want to do that.
There had to be a law, right?
Where is the law? Show me the law.
Why is the Supreme Court decision a silly argument?
And I think we're finished. They think it's the law, and they have all the guns. You know, it's an authoritarian approach.
Now we can see a new world coming into view. A world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order.
The latest technology for identifying people when they make purchases is actually the implantable chip that you can actually embed directly into human flesh.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? You will rule on that, mark my words.
A chip in everybody would be the universal monetary system par excellence, because there'd be no escape from it.
Americans have been taught to expect their salvation from government instead of recognizing government as the most dangerous threat they'll face in their lives.
It is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated by government against the working men and women of America.
It's organized crime. All you do is you call the Republicans the Genoveses, and you call the Democrats the Gambinos.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special news report. Hostilities have broken out between East and West following the breakdown of talks this afternoon.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone. The good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful. We have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world. Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. For those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
I pledge allegiance to the flag. What do those words mean to you? To me, they say, thank you, America, for your strength, for your courage, and for our freedom, which has been a beacon to the world for 200 years. Of the United States of America, whose bright stars are 50 states, each bearing its own stamp of individuality. people, 200 million strong. People who have come to her from all corners of the earth.
And to the republic for which it stands.
A land of laws, an ingenious system of checks and balances that allows no man to become a tyrant and lets no group prevail if their power is not tempered with a real concern for the governed. A land where the right of dissent and free speech is jealously guarded, where the ballot box is the sword and the people its wielder.
One nation under God.
A land where freedom of worship is a cornerstone of her being. A land graced with temples and churches, synagogues and altars that rise in profusion to embrace all the religions of the world.
Indivisible.
A land forged by the hot steel of